relational, incomplete, processual, connective, responsive, unstable. The distinction between objects and things and their entities have preoccupied many philosophers. Martin Heidegger argued that a thing can be understood in a narrow and broad sense. The narrower or limited meaning of thing is that which can be touched, reached or seen, i.e. what is present at hand. In the wider meaning of the term, the thing is every affair or transaction, something that is in this or that condition, the things that happen in the world, occurrences, events. In his seminal text, The Thing, Heidegger considers that a thing, like nearness, cannot be encountered directly. As an example, he presents the jug. He argues that a jug can be a thing in the narrow sense, something present at hand. He also asks, what is the true thingness of the jug? Is this thingness the void enclosed in the base and side of the jug that is filled with liquid? Or is it a thing to pour out something, bound up in the act of pouring? In this example, Heidegger presents the thing as something that is dependent on its context. This context may also involve us and how we encounter or meet that thing. So in summary, he suggests a thing could be more a kind of model, approach, system or framework, even an environment of sorts. But what about the idea of sound thing? And how might thingness hold an important place in what can be thought of as DIY electronic music? We tend not to think of the electronic or sound generating circuit as an object. A circuit enables things to flow, in this case electric current, in a particular direction from one thing to another, and through things such as electronic components that assists or restricts this flow. There is a transaction of sorts between the components in the circuit and the flow of the current. This way of making sound points towards the broader view of thing, that of an environment or framework, where sound encounters or potentials may exist. There is also the thingness of making the circuit, making the connections for things to flow. So when thinking about the thingness of a sound-generating circuit, is this the connectivity of the circuit, the schema, or the electricity flowing through the circuit? Or the way in which the circuit is built, sounded or reconfigured, or the community from which the circuit arises? At this point, we could also look at the work of Li Yufan and the Monoha movement, the School of Things. This movement emerged in Japan in the 1960s with a group of artists, Yufan included, that focused mainly on installations and the use of primary materials such as rock, sand, wood and metal. Perhaps more importantly, the School of Things placed great emphasis on the encounter between the viewer, listener and the thing, and the representation of, to use Yufan's words, the world as it is. The school of things touches on both the narrow and broad meaning of thing as presented earlier by Heidegger. In the narrow sense, the materials and objects that are present at hand, things near to us, things that occupy the space around us, and more broadly speaking, the thing as an encounter, transaction, or event. In terms of sound making, all these conditions also hold true to the listener, the sound installation, our relationship to and with sound-making artifacts near at hand, sounds from everyday objects and things, and how we engage with and encounter these sounds. Closely connected to our discussion on objects and things is the idea of material, and materials from which sound is made is also central to music for DIY electronics and what I shall refer to as the DIY sonic artist. Material may also extend to electronic component, integrated circuit or microprocessor. This is not necessarily contemplating sound as material or the materiality of sound, arguably an oxymoron given the immateriality of sound, but sound of materials. The DIY sonic artist looks to materials for inherent sound potential. Such materials may also adopt instrumental qualities or dictate sounding interactions. We can go a step further and arrive at the idea of sound through materials. A subtle difference to sound of, but through suggests a direction of travel, conditional, a journey. What is more, through implies action, dynamism, cause and effect. In my recent work with sound artist Tim Shaw, we put forward the idea of sonic wayfaring. Borrowing from Tim Ingold, wayfaring is thought of as not merely travel, but travel in response to the environment and its characteristics. The wayfarer may pause, meander, and take influence from the specifics of these places. Materials themselves thus suggest an environment for sonic wayfaring, a means by which to encounter a sound thing. We also approached sonic wayfaring through considering fields, specifically electric-magnetic fields, EMFs. For example, a radio tuned to static will be placed in the vicinity of an object emitting EMFs. These have included hacked and modified disposable cameras that produce EMFs when charging and flashing. And Telsa-style spark gaps, small DIY circuits which allowed a high voltage electric current to pass between two bits of bare wire. Phillips, Silver and Borley have further investigated motivations behind bespoke making found amongst groups of hobbyists, communities or enthusiasts who regularly make tools and equipment for their activities. From this, they have drawn up classifications of motivations and types of making found in DIY cultures. Making in the everyday, essential need. Making for everyday improvement. Making for demonstrating skill. Making for bespoke requirement. Making for financial requirements. Making for reappropriation. Making for documentation. And making for secondary use. All these motivations and types of making may also apply to the DIY sonic artist. The DIY sonic artist, nonetheless, can bring a distinct classification to this list: making as performance. There is an important distinction between making for performance and making as performance. Making for performance suggests two separate sequential activities, making followed by performance. Making as performance points to an activity where both making and performance are subsumed into a singular stylistic performance type or characteristic. Making as performance is by default process-driven. It may involve starting from scratch, a blank canvas, silent stage, or working from something part built, half finished. As the making process unfolds, sound may emerge through the exploration of materials and assembly, through the connectivity of parts and components, and through the investigation of things. Making, by its very nature, implies a liminal state between incomplete and complete, transitional, prototypic, or, borrowing from Karen Barad, the idea of halfwayness and intra-activity, a dynamism of forces where things constantly exchange and diffract. Finally, we should look at performance installation, a form of making as performance. Performance installation can be thought of as a nexus between performance and installation art, DIY electronic music, and maker culture. In the book chapter, Sacrificial Flaws, Making and Unmaking, I've defined performance installation as an activity that embraces assembling and disassembling of sound devices and artifacts in the performance space. Public making, sound through materials and materials at hand, sonic wayfaring, ready-made actions, exploiting the affordance of objects and processes of making, and the use of site and architectural features as material. The definition also touches on a number of related themes: silent actions, uncontrollable instruments, unstable systems, performative failures, reimagined affordance of objects, playing with resource, and improvising inside electronics. In the work of the DIY sonic artist, we can think of a shift away from performance gesture towards everyday action and labour, work. There is a constructivist ethos here, that of attributing art to everyday life. This shift also brings us to a different sort of performance style, a style where the relationship between objects and things and performer is more democratic. The human body is no longer the primary source of significance, but is on a more equal footing with surrounding objects and things in performance. Making as performance, therefore, encourages attending to sound. Attending suggesting that a sound has some autonomy and once established needs care, maintenance or guidance. For example, I've recently taken to installing vibrating tables in the performance space. A bass transducer is placed on a small table along with a range of objects such as a metal bowl, oil can, stainless steel coffee pot and butter dish, and nails, screws and buttons. Low frequencies played through the transducer causes the objects to vibrate across the table and eventually fall onto the floor, each fall leading to a unique sound event. The performer, installer, thus attends to these objects' vibrating sound stuff by locating the fallen objects from their resting place and reinstalling them on the table. We could also think of generative sound circuits that are autonomous or play themselves. Such circuits simply may require switching on or off, or mixed and combined with other generative circuits. With the idea of a music of things, or the sound thing, a series of ambiguities arise, stuff that is hard to grasp, put your finger on. One may ask, where lies the work of the DIY sonic artist? Does it lie in the self-made physical artifacts, circuits and sound-making objects, or in schematics and extra musical documents, or through the exploration of things and, broadly speaking, relational aesthetics, the interconnectedness between materials, objects, and people?